For USCFootball.com, I'm Keely Eure here with Dan Weber for instant analysis of USC's Wednesday practice of UNLV week. It was another day of physical practice, but this time only in shoulder pads. Just to start it off, Dan, what did you see today?
Maybe not as physical as last Wednesday, and maybe not, they didn't throw the ball around as much, which tells you something maybe about, how they're approaching that. They're not kidding that this is going to be a run-first team. I think that gives you, kind of, some sense. They were in shoulder pads and helmets, shorts. And last week I thought Tuesday and Wednesday were both really physical. I thought yesterday was really physical. Not sure today was as much. They've got, a lot of little nagging kind of things, and, they don't have everybody there. You don't have Toa with his pec strain. You don't have, Josh Fallow. Clayton Bradley is back, but he looks like that, he doesn't look real fluid. And Austin Jackson, I think that ankle is actually bothering him more now. It was a high ankle sprain, and they're taping it up a lot. But when you watch him, he's out there battling. But it wasn't, one of those days where you just feel great about your personnel groups and all that. Yeah. You got your quarterback, you got your running backs looking good, you got Marquise Stepp. Not going to play this week, but he's back off concussion, protocol. So you got all your running backs, but just not probably the same quality of practice that you had last Wednesday. But that may have been the best practice of the year. So maybe we're being, unfair to them, about this week's practice. And they do have some specific things they want to do to get ready for Saturday, which wasn't the case last Wednesday.
When Clay Helton was asked about Toa Lobendahn and if he will be ready to play on Saturday, Helton said, "We'll see." You and I noted last Thursday when Helton brought it up about Toa Lobendahn being held out, Clay Helton doesn't necessarily have to tell us if someone's held out, because if they're going to be back on Tuesday, it's not that big of a deal. But noting that he did bring that up on Thursday kind of made us raise our eyebrows a little bit. Maybe this is a bigger deal than Helton is leading on. Now that we might have a rookie quarterback and a rookie center starting on Saturday, is there any concern at that for that specific position groups?
Yeah, you picked up on that more than I did, because you've kind of gotten used to the fact that, Toa is working his way through, a number of things his whole time that he's been here. But I thought that was a good point. He wouldn't have had, Clay would not, we don't get to see Thursday's practice. We're not going to catch him again until Tuesday. He wouldn't have had to tell you that if it weren't maybe an issue, and the fact that he's, barely made any snaps the last 2 days. Yeah. When these are their, 2 heavy days to get ready for Saturday's game, and you've got basically, Brett Neilon and Gustin doing all the snapping, much the way it was in the spring. Yeah, I would say just the fact that you pick your quarterback now, you'd probably like him to be getting snaps from the guy that's going to be playing in the game with him. And now those 2 days are gone. So I think there's more. I think your instincts were correct last Thursday when you said, I wonder what this means. I think you were right. We'll see, but either way they go, if you go with a freshman quarterback and a freshman center, or if you go with a center who hasn't really been working much in the last 9 or 10 days, either way, that's it's something you got to deal with.
Yep. Well, on a more positive injury update, Porter Gustin said that he feels very happy as to how his body is responding after having a full contact practice yesterday. He kind of told us, even though the coaches yesterday were precautionary, he said, well, I'm starting on Saturday. He won't be on a snap count. So unless something drastic happens in his knee and his swelling between now and Saturday, fans will see Porter Gustin on the field.
Yeah, and there was no swelling with his knee. I think that was the key thing. And when you talk to Porter this year, it's a completely different conversation than it was last year. He will talk to you this year as if he's a rehab specialist, as he's been through it so much. Yeah. And he, did all the wrong things last year. Everybody did. And this year it's, he knows what you have to do in terms of the rehab and how many hours you got to spend doing it, and how you have to test your test yourself and run, do the straight line running and do all the things. And he said, I think I could have come back, a little quicker, but, he was aware of it. I know when you hear it from Clay, though, Clay says, well, he wanted to come back sooner. We had to hide his helmet last week, and we're probably going to have to hide his helmet Saturday so that he doesn't, he doesn't. That's what Clancy, I guess, was the one that said, we're going to have to hide his helmet. We're trying to figure out how to get 20, 25 snaps from him that he doesn't have to be out there, and that he said they've already assigned, the equipment manager to hide his helmet.
Yeah.
So we shall see how that goes. I like the approach to it this year. It's not quite as, Porter really knows how important this is to him, to the team, to everybody, the time he's missed and all that. So I think everybody learned their lesson last year. And he can't say enough how good he feels and how much he's ready to come back. So I pretty much believe last year it was obvious he wasn't ready to come back. He just wanted to come back, and he was allowed to. This year he is ready to come back, and they've been a little more, hesitant and a little more controlled and a little more, like he goes to see the doctor this morning. They check out any swelling at all. He had no pain, no swelling. That's a pretty good, because he said the thing that worried him most was yesterday's practice.
Yeah.
If he got through yesterday's full contact, full pads, he was going to be feeling pretty good. He did that. So I don't think I've heard anybody that doesn't think he's going to play.
Mm-hmm. It was a defensive interview day today, so we got to talk to Clancy Pendergast and get more info about how he made those starting position decisions. He said that Bubba Bolden had the best communication and chemistry with Marvell Tell at that safety position, and then at corner he said that Isaiah Langley and I blanked on Greg Johnson. Thank you. Greg Johnson really battled well for that corner spot, but Greg will get the start on Saturday. He said Greg had a great spring and fall and has really capitalized on that. So we got to hear more about that from him.
Yeah, Greg Johnson, he said he thought the biggest thing where he's improved is the ability to track and play the ball down the field. And then he said he's a willing tackler, which he's always been. He's always had the ability to come up and tackle people in space, and that's what they're going to do in terms of college football. Is they're trying to make cornerbacks come up and make tackles. Yeah. And a lot of times you got little guys that are really quick and can do all this in terms of pass coverage. They're not necessarily going to come up and make tackles. Greg Johnson is completely the opposite of that. He will come up and he will take you down like he's a linebacker. And so I think that was the thing. In the Pac-12, you better be able to tackle in space, and they really like. And that, I still remember the first practice in pads that I saw Greg Johnson, he just completely came up and poleaxed somebody. I mean, they just vanished. And I don't know if that was a play where he broke his collarbone or not. I can't. But he is it was a good way to say it. He's a willing tackler, and he really tackles well in space. So that's a good thing to get. You got him. With him, he's 195 pounds, and then you got. Iman Marshall at 200 pounds, who's also a very willing tackler. So you got a couple of guys who at corners who really tackle well, and that's where people try to attack you. And Clancy basically really likes the way this team tackles. That this team, they've worked on it a lot. It's been two emphasis on defense: tackling and eliminating the explosive plays, the big plays. And he said they are. Said the depth helps in terms of just the way they practice it, but that the tackling has really improved, and that's one of the reasons Greg Johnson is on the field, and it's one of the reasons tackling has improved because of Greg Johnson. Mm-hmm.
We also got to talk to defensive freshmen for the first time this fall. I got to pop into Elijah Griffin's presser for a little bit, and he said he was surprised that he's listed second on the depth chart, but says he's happy to just see any playing time as a freshman. Said he's still learning from those veteran guys, especially Iman Marshall. Who do you get to talk to today?
I think Porter was it's hard to leave. Hard to leave Porter. And then I thought Clancy, you really want to hear where are they. I think the thing I really wanted to talk to Clancy about is, have you figured out your defensive rotation? Have you figured out how you're going to substitute, how much you're going to substitute, what the pattern is going to be? And he said that's the conversation that the defensive staff with Clay is going to have tomorrow morning. And he said they're going to figure out. He said, I think I know kind of how I want to do it. But he said the final decision, is always going to be Clay's. But that's going to be a big conversation tomorrow in terms of how. It's obvious. You watch them; they're doing a lot of substituting. They're doing a lot of running guys in and out. In that defensive front and those linebackers, you just look at all three position groups. There's nobody that you don't look at and say, man, they got a lot of guys they want to get on the field. Even with the injuries, there are a lot of people that I would guess are going to be in the game Saturday.
Yeah, well, a lot of people have sent us questions about, do we trust Clancy saying that he'll actually rotate? Do you believe that when he says it?
I think it's a different Clancy. I do. He had a little anecdote. He said the depth is just so different. He said we for the mock game week, he said we always treat it like a real game, and you have your position groups in your hotel room and what have you. And he said, the first time ever, it was standing room only. He said we haven't ever had that before. So you get the sense that it's helping them practice better, practice differently, and they're getting the reps for the younger guys that they weren't getting those younger guys reps before. I talked to Ronnie Bradford about that, and he said, we installed even the freshmen, he said, who were here early, we installed the defense in the spring, then we did it again in the summer, which is pretty good, pretty good. They did it with the conditioning stuff, and then they've done it again. He said this is the third time for those guys. They feel like they really know it. For the new guys that came in the summer, it's been installed twice. He said, we're just in a different place. He said, we're not going to overload, the new guys, but as far as where they are in terms of knowing the defense, he says they're able to teach it differently. We've watched, Ronnie up close, and they are teaching it differently, and they're breaking it down, and they're teaching it faster. And he said, they really feel like they really understand it, and they do it in the walkthroughs and the position group meetings. And he said, when they get on the field, we want them going fast. And we'll stop them and quickly, do a correction. But he said, it's going different. It's the way we see it, where it looks like it's being taught differently. It is. He said, and the reason it is because they're in a different place as far as knowing the defense. So, I think they're really. And Clay, every time you ask him, and again today, I'm really confident about that defense. Yep. That's where we really feel good about that defense. So it'd be interesting to see because they're going to get challenged by a, 6'5", 225-pound Armani Rogers, I guess. He's a true dual threat guy and had as many as 193 rushing yards in a game last year, and is going to put a lot of pressure on them. They've got a tailback who had 1,336 yards last year. So between the two of them, you got more than 2,100 yards. So, and they're big-time athletes. I mean, they could easily play in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good way to get started because they're going to see a lot of that, in the rest of the schedule. So I think this is a good challenge for the defense to go out there and have people who can make plays against them. How that's going to break down on the UNLV defense, do they have, some players like that or not? I think we'll find that out. It might be a good way to get your offensive line and your running backs going against, a team that we'll see, athletically how much they can keep up with the USC with the UNLV defense.
Mm-hmm. To circle back to where we started this instant, this wasn't the practice that you expected from USC today. Is there any concern there that they didn't practice how you thought they were?
No, I think game week is different. They know the things they need to do. Last year, I thought they spent a couple of weeks getting ready for Western Michigan because Western Michigan had a new coaching staff and they weren't sure what are they going to do. Yeah. And so they were looking at what did they do with, at the Indiana, I think, where the coach, what did they do there and what did they do here? I think they got overly caught up in trying to outguess what Western Michigan was going to do. And they kind of cruised into it with more, the practices were more cerebral, not so physical. I think yesterday was plenty physical. I think today, some of it was, I didn't think they threw the ball as much as, they really threw it, last Wednesday. Didn't throw it as much today. I don't know what that means. They've got their quarterback, and then it was more of a. I thought it was interesting. You're getting most of the reps are going to JT Daniels, and then the second reps are going to Matt Fink. But the day ends on Jack Sears on a 30-yard scramble. I think it was against the first defense for a touchdown, and then they hit the three horns. So we'll see. And it wasn't, for example, they weren't tackling anybody. They weren't even thudding anybody. They were kind of touching them.
Yeah.
And so, you could see one after another good runs. Would those have been, good runs if somebody was tackling? I don't know.
Yeah.
But they clearly amped it back today a little bit.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. And they do have more injuries than I think they'd probably like going into Saturday. So, but if you only do it once, in preseason, that's fine.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for Wednesday's UNLV practice. For Dan Weber, I'm Keely Eure. For more, check out uscfootball.com.